Right. Probably start introductions.
Okay.
It's noon.
All right. It's noon. Welcome everybody to E2Tech Connects with the Environmental and Energy Technology Council of Maine. We're here today with Spencer Thibodeau of the Department of Energy, a homegrown personality from Maine. And so my name is Sarah Tracy. I am a partner in the energy group of Pierce Atwood and co-chair of the energy and infrastructure group there. And I'm also, I have in my other day job is co-chairing the program committee for E2Tech. So we're really glad that you all are joining us and that Spencer has agreed, and also that the DOE has agreed to allow him to speak with us today. I have a few introductory slides, and then we'll move through. Apologies if I stumble over these. This is usually Marty's deal, but I'm pinch hitting today. So, you know, you're seeing my first outing, and you'll probably recognize that I haven't done this before, but here we go. So E2Tech, everybody who's on here is a member, so you should know what E2Tech is, but we do have a lot of people that we're partnering with. We've got support organizations that either are members that we're working with. We've got companies that are members, and just an amazing amount of professionals who participate in what we do and also financially support what we do by coming onto some of these forums and sponsorships, etc. We are a convener. You know, a while ago we did a survey, which is what do people like about E2Tech, and that was that we bring people together, and we do that in to the best of our ability in an unbiased and balanced way. Sometimes we're reminded that we haven't quite achieved that goal, but we're always striving for it. And then in non-COVID times, we're a connector. We're still trying to do that even virtually. So certainly today, when you ask questions, please identify yourself so people know kind of who you are and who you're with. That's a way of connecting, but we hope to go back to in-person events quite soon when you can actually shake people's hand and give them a hug and connect in a way that we haven't been able to do so over the last 2 years. Obviously, you all should be members of E2Tech if you're in an E2Tech Connects, but we have a bunch of ways to join. And there's always a higher level. So if your company is interested in being more of a sustaining partner, sustaining member, which I'll talk about in a minute, we could always use that additional support and consistent support to bring you the information that we do consistently. We have our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy here. I'm not going to read it, but you know, basically, we've been working hard as a group to make good on the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, including working with diverse members of our community to place them in internships and jobs with our members, and a lot of our members are fully on board with that program. So certainly if you have any interest in helping us with this goal, please reach out to Marty, because we always, we do work with other entities like IntWork, which have even sort of new Mainers who are interested in, who have prior professional experience, who are interested in becoming part of the professional community here. And so if you have opportunities for us to place in your organization, please let us know. We also partner with the Maine Technology Institute. This is their core mission, but you may or may not know that E2Tech essentially convenes the Environmental Tech Board for NTI. We're kind of like their agent. And that entity has a lot of money to give out for in projects in the environmental and tech sector. So To the extent that you have ideas or your company is working on a project, or you know of someone who has a project that could use some funding, we encourage you to reach out to Marty, who can put you in touch with this board and also work with you on a proposal to receive grant funding. So this is something we take seriously. There's apparently money to be given, so certainly follow up with Marty if you're interested. Thank you to our sustaining leaders, Bernstein Schur, Con Ed, Power Market, which is a community solar organization, SMRT, and Burns and McDonald. These are well-known businesses in Maine that consistently give at a high level year after year, and we really appreciate their support. And that helps with our programming and our operations, and it basically creates a consistent source of funding that we can depend on. And to the extent that you and your company can participate with us in that, we certainly would love to have you join on. We also have a slew of sustaining stewards, which you see here. Again, these companies participate pretty much every year at a higher level of support, and the consistency is really important for us, and they make it possible for us to do what we do. We ask that in return, you as members and sort of hopefully beneficiaries of the informational forms that we provide, that we ask that you patronize, to the extent you can, patronize these businesses. They're supporting E2Tech. We hope that you will keep them in mind and support them when you can by doing business with them. And finally, we have our annual partners and event sponsors, TRC, VHB, and Maine Biz. A few housekeeping notes. So your mic has been automatically shut off. You're on mute. Ideally, you're on mute. We may have some problems with that, but hopefully we won't. Riley will take care of it if we do. This is actually not a webinar. This is a Zoom, so you can turn it on. We ask that you don't turn it on until we get into the Q&A session. We ask that you stay on mute so that we can hear Spencer, uninterrupted. And then certainly when you want to ask questions, you can either ask them I think we'll try and ask them through the chat, but this is a little bit informal and free-flowing, so if we end up asking them sort of by unmuting and asking the questions and we can manage that, then we'll figure that out. I will say that we have quite a few attendees who have signed up. We have over 60 attendees who have signed up, so we may, I may have to do some crowd management, but that's a good problem to have. This event is being recorded, so just keep that in mind particularly if your camera is on. And then when you ask questions through the chat, please ask who you would like the question to be directed to, and I assume that's going to be Spencer in this case. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. If you have technological problems, there's Riley Ewald's email on the screen, and she can certainly help you, and she's great at multitasking and helping people in crisis while she's being filmed on these forums. So I'm gonna actually skip over Spencer just for a quick second, and I'm gonna go just to our upcoming events real quick. We've got our Clean Tech Open, we've got the Maine Space Grant. At the end of April, we have a sludge spreading forum, and also we are planning our 20th anniversary for E2Tech. That'll be in May. It's going to be an in-person party. Hopefully there'll be a speaker too, but it's really designed to thank everybody who's been part of E2Tech's history. So anyways, just wanted to put that out there. I didn't really want to do that at the end. So to the main attraction, Spencer Thibodeau. Spencer has been is our homegrown hero. He's a graduate of Cheverus High School, so grew up in the Portland area, and obviously went to law school, college, and then practiced at Verrill Dana and here in Portland in the real estate department for 8 years. During that time, he was also on the Portland City Council for 6 years, and many of you saw him, advancing policy during that time. And then in 2020, Spencer became the senior Maine advisor to the Biden and Harris campaign, and also the transition team for Governor Mills in 2019. And to many people's surprise, in 2021, he decided to relocate down to DC and work for the U.S. Department of Energy. He's the Regional Intergovernmental and External Affairs Specialist for the Northeast out of the Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs at DOE. And we're really happy Spencer's joined us today. I mean, the purpose of today is to get an update on what Spencer's role is at DOE, what he's found interesting, what he can tell us about what's going on in DC and what we need to know here in Maine, and pretty much any other questions within bounds, within reason, that you have for Spencer that you're curious about. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Spencer, and then we'll save some time at the end for he'll speak for about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have question and answer session. So as you're listening to Spencer, please, and you have some questions in mind, please jot them down, put them in the chat, and we'll try our best to get to your questions. So Spencer, thank you. I will stop my sharing and hand it over to you.
Amazing. Sarah, thank you so much for the introduction and for the Zoom rules. It would be really tragic to have a Zoom faux pas 2 years into the pandemic, right as things are like opening up. So I'm really happy that we went through that. I have to have this background on because I was just in Maine and I know it's still a little bit chilly there. It's beautifully sunny and spring has sprung in Washington. And so I don't want to, signs of things to come to Maine, just give it a couple more weeks. We're all going to get there, and we're going to get there together. Well, let me just start out by saying it's awesome to be back with E2Tech. When I was practicing, I did find myself at a couple of E2Tech events, and just the connections, the people that you meet are really instrumental in kind of moving forward, not just policy when I was on the city council, but also networking with folks who I ended up working with when I was practicing. I made the decision last summer that I wasn't going to run for re-election on the city council, and I wasn't sure quite what that meant, but what I had hoped that it would mean was that I might have a few extra hours in the day to not be at city council meetings or out to dinner, and people come and stop me and say, "Hey, Thibodeau, my sidewalk needs to be fixed. Can you help me with that?" Took a little trip and got back and received a call from the Department of Energy about this new program that they were going to try to set up down here. And so I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about my job, what I'm doing. But before I do, I want to just provide a little bit of context as to where we are. We are at the precipice of a clean energy future, largely because of the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last fall. And for those of you who don't know much about DOE, DOE is a department that oversees approximately 125,000 employees and contractors. This is a huge, huge department. I fall into an appointee position, which there are about 80 of us in the department, just to give you some sense of size. That bipartisan infrastructure bill for DOE means probably one of the largest investments in DOE history since it was created in 1977. And that investment is nearly $62 billion in programs that are going to be rolled out across the country. And just to give you some sense of what $62 billion gets you, that is approximately 60 new DOE programs. That includes about 16 demonstration and 32 deployment programs. It actually expands funding for 12 existing research, deployment, and demonstration programs as well. So that is the universe that we're talking about right now. What does that mean on the ground, and how does DOE, this institution, interact with states and localities? That's where the regional specialists come in. And so to give you some sense of what we're talking about here, regional specialists is a program that, can everyone see this, by the way? I just want to make sure that this came up on the screen. Secretary Granholm, who is the Secretary of Energy, she was governor of Michigan. And what she knew about her state was in order to govern effectively, you have to know what's going on the ground in every corner of your state. And so for the country, she decided to take a proactive position on that. So when you think about the EPA and some of your connections with EPA, how we have different regions. In this case, we are regional specialists that interact specifically with localities within our region, and most of us have some experience. So as you can see, the best Northeast up there in the top right-hand corner of your screen is where I am. But my colleagues, all 6 of them, serve under what's called our Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs. And we're led by the Assistant Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs. Her name is Amy Woodman. She's amazing. And so what we're tasked with is going out across our regions and checking in with folks on the ground. So that's not just state energy offices, which we have a really good relationship through NASIO, which is the Association of Energy Offices from across the country, but also at the municipal and local level. So working with state governments, we're working with mayors, city councilors, advocacy organizations to figure out what folks are doing on the ground so that we can lift those up at the national level and say, hey, have you heard about what Maine's doing with its 100,000 heat pump challenge? Why don't you try to do that in Minnesota, right? So there's really a lot of cross-pollination. So whether you're in Maine or you're in New Jersey or you're in California or you're in Washington State, if you have something you think we should be aware of, our email address is right there at the bottom. Please email the regional specialist team. We are your points of contact. And to that end, I like to say this because I know many of you probably already have connections with the Department of Energy. And so I want to be clear, if you have a connection, you can keep your connection. But as you know, the Department of Energy is huge. And so each program office has its kind of bucket that things could fall within. If you have an issue or you have a question that doesn't fall neatly into one of those buckets, you can always reach out to the region specialist and we'll be there to assist you in that endeavor. To give you some sense of the work that I've been doing since I started here, the initial outreach portion was to really try to set up base camps in each state. And so that's talking with state energy offices about challenges that we're facing. When I started this job in September of 2021, as you know, and as they say in Game of Thrones, winter was absolutely coming. And so obviously for the Northeast, our biggest issue is the cost of energy. And I know there's we're in the midst of just a global issue with that respect. But as we were looking forward to the winter, we wanted to make sure that we were on top of them. ISO New England and the states have a really dynamic relationship. And so just trying to cut my teeth and understanding, okay, what are the issues before each one of these new states? So I set out, spoke to each state energy office, special and senior advisors to governor's offices, and then targeted specific mayors and advocacy organizations so we could more fully understand what was going on the ground. From there, what we did was we kind of started to lean into bill implementation. So the bipartisan infrastructure law bill was passed in October of 2021. And so after $1.3 trillion investment in the country goes into effect, what is our job? Our job is to go across the country and say, this is what this practically means for the end user. I always say this, I said this when I was a city councilor. If we can't figure out how to do the little things right, the communication, the sidewalks, the things that impact people's everyday lives and explain to them what it practically means to them, there is no way we can be successful on these bigger broad policy issues, which is exactly why I think this regional specialist program is so important, because what it allows us to do is to say, all right, we're going to come to, for example, Connecticut. I went to Connecticut with Secretary Granholm in December, and we highlighted the work that an EV charging manufacturer was doing in Connecticut. And they're really just getting started and ramping up. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are creating a joint office with the Department of Transportation to oversee the electrification of EV charging and expansion of EV charging stations across the country, roughly 500,000 of them in the next few years, which, as you can imagine, is a game changer. And 500,000 seems like a lot, but we have a ton more work to do. And so our goal was to show up, understand, okay, what is this company doing? And how does this company, what are the components that they need? What is the workforce that they need? So we're going to highlight, labor. We're going to highlight the partnerships that they have with community colleges and the governor's office and kind of pilot projects that they're running. How does a program like the bipartisan infrastructure law impact this specific company, and what does it mean for others? And that's the story that we want to tell across the country. What it also means is, in the Northeast, is discussions about offshore wind and solarizing, community solar projects and utility grade solar projects, right? And targeted investments in those. It also means talking about tough issues like transmission. And as many of us know, that can be, we have a connectivity problem. We've got space for energy, and we have to move that energy over lines to different parts of the country. If you like the weekly or weekend show with John Oliver, he did an amazing overview of the complex issue of transmission and kind of the catch-22 around trying to explain to people how this actually impacts their lives. So what regional specialists are doing currently today is we are traveling starting to meet as COVID is receding, starting to meet with municipalities, advocacy organizations for what comes next, which is bill implementation, which is where we find ourselves. And so what I want to encourage every single person to do on this chat is to, on this webinar, is to keep in touch with the Department of Energy. And the best way to do that is the website that I just inserted into the chat, which is energy.gov/bill. What this is going to do, as you can imagine, there's tons of programs that are being set up, as I explained. There are going to be grants, there are going to be NOIs, there are going to be funding opportunity announcements that the Department of Energy will be putting out. This is your one-stop shop to keep track of what's going on. And this is updated quite often. And so if you're looking for specific releases, whether it's related to offshore wind or grants for research universities or hydrogen hubs, this is going to be where you're going to want to go. If you do not see what you're looking for on the web, do not panic. Let me just say that again. Do not panic. There's a lot of information coming out, but that is where you want to start. If you can't find what you're looking for there, as I said, you can always email. I will also drop my email and phone number in the chat as well so that you have it. So I just said a lot, but in sum, what this means for the country, what this historic investment means for the country is an initial step in the right direction. We still have one more piece of the president's goal to implement, which is whatever Build Back Better may look like this summer, right? So we've made a huge down payment on what will be the next generation of our clean energy economy. That means more jobs. That means more ability to retrain workers for these industries, because we know we've got some work to do there. But then it means what comes next. And that's kind of where we're turning as well. So we are in full implementation mode with the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we're also in where do we go after we start setting up those programs. And that's really the second part of this discussion. What this opportunity has meant to me is I felt like in 2020 we had made a really important change where we actually could play a little offense as opposed to defense with respect to clean energy investments. And I felt like when after the election that I didn't want to sit this one out. I wanted to actually come down here, cut my teeth, understand how this large apparatus can help steer the country in that direction. And that ultimately is what this opportunity has afforded me. And so I'm excited to be here with all of you. I'm excited to kind of get into the question and answer portion of this. And to the extent that I can answer questions, great. To the extent that I can't, please email me and we'll see who we can connect you with to try to find an answer for these questions. But we've got a lot of exciting things that are about to happen. Things are starting to open up. Masks are starting to come off a little bit, which is nice. We can see people's smiles again. And hopefully, we can do this in person in the next year, because for me, that's where I learn the most and that's where it's most impactful. So Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Spencer. That was great. So for those of you who are on, certainly would welcome your questions. So you can start typing them in the chat. Hopefully you can find the chat. Riley, I don't know if you want to just say where to find it and how to do that real quick.
Yeah, on the bottom of your screen, there should be a little chat icon, or you guys can just unmute and chime in whenever.
Yep.
So
I'll start off. I know just to kind of get things going. Oh, do we want to do the little screen thing?
Oh yes,
really
a smiling screenshot if everyone wants to.
If everybody can take their cameras off or put the cameras on briefly, that will show if you're actually listening. So if you could do that, and then Riley's going to take a quick.
I'll do a countdown here.
Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1, smile. There you go. Got it.
Hopefully everybody's back in the question and answer session, and I don't need to monopolize the time. So we have a question from Rosanna Patain from York, and talking about small towns. She's from York, but you've been with the city of Portland, who's always great at utilizing resources, but there's a lot of towns across the state that are looking at sort of resilience, climate change issues, using clean energy, electrification. What can you tell people from small towns about how to help their efforts to make these kinds of transitions?
I'll say two things. I think the first thing is we want to the extent that we can, we want to lift up the voices of not just small towns, but also cities as well, right? Portland is a smaller city, as it were. It's a big city in the state of Maine, but it's a small city as compared to some other states. And for example, for York, if there's something specific that you all are doing, we want to help lift you up. I'll just say we just instituted a program at the Department of Energy, which is called the Better Climate Challenge. Excuse me, I was going to say the Better Buildings Challenge, which is another. You can just see how this starts getting a little confusing. The Better Climate Challenge. Just last week, we had a kickoff. What that does is essentially a partnership agreement between the Department of Energy and a town, municipality, organization to highlight the work that they're doing to get themselves to a specific climate goal that they agree to get to. And I got an email from a town in New York, and I don't remember the name of the town, but I do remember that it was less than 5,000 people. So just give you a sense. And I said, well, we don't really have the staff to fill this out. We don't really have the ability to kind of join this. And I said, but wait, you do. What DOE has decided to do in this respect today is actually try to streamline things to make it a little bit easier for towns that don't have as much staff. So in this example, it was a one-page partnership agreement that was filled out, but then DOE was going to do a second thing, which is the follow-up, which is specific webinars with these municipalities to help them through the process, so that you're not filling out application after application, right? Like our goal is we want you to implement. We want to work with you to implement whatever the position, whatever the item is, so that you can meet your climate goals. And we don't want to be a burden. We want to help you. So the message that we received back in the fall was for the bipartisan infrastructure law, for Build Back Better, or whatever that may look like. We want to make sure that smaller states like Maine, like Vermont, like New Hampshire, a lot like Rhode Island, a lot of these states that are in the Northeast, have the ability not just to, participate in the conversation about where we're going, but also reap in some of those benefits without overburdening staff. And so that is a transition that is underway. But as you can see, DOE has had a lot of work to do to kind of retool itself after some years of changes. And so we are still actively doing it. So it takes a little while to turn the ship, but we're on our way there. We want to partner with every community that we can. So if there's something specific, please do. You have my email in the chat. Please do reach out to me. Help us help you. And that's my challenge to folks.
All right. So we have a couple of questions from Bill Franks and Ben Grant, which can kind of be combined. So the questions are around what Maine specific projects do you know of that are in the works that funding will go towards? And Bill Franks asks, what about DOE support for electric school buses? So is that also in the works? What are you, and that may be broadened out to, what are you seeing in Maine that's sort of coming across the transom that the DOE funding can be used towards?
Well, two things. The first about Maine specifically. So we are still in full implementation mode. So just to give you a sense of where we are. Bill passed last fall. We just started getting guidance out in January, and we have now moved into what we call these listening sessions with stakeholders. So those are actually going on both in the month of February and the beginning of this month. From there, we'll actually transition into what are the funding opportunity announcements, which is the specific money, the projects, the consideration of program offices of state objectives or whatever they may be. So that hasn't started quite yet. So we're a little bit ahead, but I would expect in the next month or two, you'll see a little bit more about that. And again, that website, energy.gov/bill, is where you can actually follow along to see what releases are coming out. I think there are about 7 or 8 that are on the website currently. Obviously, there's going to be many more. So we're still kind of working our way through that. As far as, I think you said, was it electric school buses was the next one? That kind of falls in a similar bucket. There was funding that you can actually see. There is actual funding for not just, heavy duty vehicles, but also for school efficiency. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are still, whether that's with DOE or another agency, we are still setting that up. So these things do take time. That's the other thing I will just say. I thought at the municipal level that things could take some time. When we were talking about a roughly $270 million budget on the city side, when you're talking about $1.3 billion and congressional guidance, like about what that actually means. It does take just a little bit longer, I'm finding, than even at the municipal level. So I know this is the question I would just say. The question that I get emailed most is kind of in the Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money. Like, when is that showing up? We're not quite there yet. We're working. We're on our way, but we're not quite there yet.
All right. So from Nancy Chandler, she wants to talk a little bit about what kind of funds will be available for regional transportation, car sharing, carpooling efforts to kind of get Maine people out of their beloved cars on 295 or wherever or the east to west roads across the state. And what can you tell us about that?
Nothing quite yet, but I will say that this is actually where I think these regional specialist roles, because again, when we go out and we're in communities, so if we're traveling or meeting with mayors, like these are the practical things that we hear about the most. And what our job is as regional specialists to do is to elevate those concerns and that input to the program offices, to the higher ups, the assistant secretaries, as they're deliberating like next steps for all these things. So, for example, the creation of this new administrative office between DOT and DOE on expanding EV charging stations across the country. As you can imagine, everybody's interested or a lot of states are interested in doing this. A lot of states actually already have roadmaps kind of put together as to where they want to see these EV charging stations go. And so as part of that input, what they are saying to us is like, we have this ready to go for funding. However, we're reading the law and it might be a little ambiguous as to whether these funds can be used in this way. And so to be able to take that comment early as we're setting up these offices has actually proved to be really important. So what I'll just say to Nancy is that I have her comment. I'll take that with me as we're kind of deliberating. And my job is to actually report back to my boss, who will put this in to the working groups that are going through these at the moment. So I can't say anything specific. The reason why I wanted to give you a little sense and context about the bipartisan infrastructure law as to where we were is just to give you context as to why the regional specialist program is set up the way that it is so that you can have one point of contact to submit these like real-time concerns or questions to the Department of Energy, which truly did not exist before. When I talked with people, they had maybe one interaction with the Department of Energy over a 4-year period. I talked with state energy offices at least once a month to give you some sense, right? So there is a lot of cross-pollination here. It is working. So please keep elevating your comments either to me or to the department, and we'll make sure that we include them as we go through implementation in the spring, which I'm most excited about.
Nice. We're going to shift gears a little bit. So John Carroll, one of our longtime members, has talked about a little bit about sort of the political dynamics going on in Washington, D.C. and also at DOE. How much, sort of what's your sense of the politics of this funding and how it gets implemented, and to the extent that there are changes in administration or influences with those political shifts, does that affect how resilient this program will be and the deployment of this funding? What's your take? Because you've been in small town politics or small city politics, now you're in the big city. What's your take on how influential political changes will be for these kinds of programs?
Luckily, I got to leave politics behind me when I left the city council.
Yeah.
Last fall.
Well, we all know there's lots of politics in DC.
Thank goodness, and got to come on to the staff side. What I will say is there's a really interesting dynamic with our department as opposed to some others. So to give you some examples for funding opportunities, the Department of Transportation and some of these others actually are formula funded, right? So you know exactly what you're going to get. That can be easily found. I think what makes the Department of Energy so interesting is that we're going to have much more competitive grant opportunities, right? And so we don't quite know yet what that's going to look like, right? So there's a process to that that allows people to come forward with their idea or their proposal, and then kind of go through a process whereby there's possible, funding at the end. That's a little bit of a difference between the department, our department, and some of the other agencies across the federal government. But luckily, that's not my bailiwick. My bailiwick is to say, if someone says, hey, I'm not sure if this quite falls within this specific funding opportunity announcement. Can you help me with that? My job is to say, hey, can we make sure that this person is applying? Because what we don't want you to do is use the limited resources that folks have, right? Especially smaller towns and municipalities, like to apply for something that doesn't fit or you can't qualify for it. That doesn't make any sense. So I think the department is extremely sensitive to those things. And I think our regional specialist program is actually helping to aid in that.
All right. What about storage? What are you seeing in the Northeast in terms of sort of storage projects that may have the ability to be funded by these by these programs? And do you think that there will be funding available through the bill for storage specifically in Maine?
I can't recall. It's so funny because someone actually asked me about this maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I have to double check my my notes on storage. What I can tell you just from my own experience and and doing some limited travel is that there's actually a lot of really interesting tools going on about storage. There are facilities across the country. There was one in I think it was either New Jersey or Connecticut that was actually kind of trying to figure out ways to essentially when it's on non-peak hours for electricity demand, to actually store some of that energy and then actually ramp it back up when, for a specific solar farm, when demand actually hits its peak, which is super interesting. What we're seeing is what I'm seeing is a lot of technology and folks kind of piloting these types of projects. It's not clear to me, and I don't recall how much funding there is for storage. So I can't answer that specific question, but if you do have a question like that, please forward it on to me and we'll see what we can get for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at, I have a cheat sheet for the infrastructure bill that was just an alert that Pierce Atwood put out, and it looks like there's $6 billion in funding for battery storage over 5 years, including $3 billion in grants for processing and refining products into the materials employed in battery manufacturing. And I'm sure many of those on this webinar would also are, I know Bill Franks is into storage as well. So certainly I think there is earmarked money, and we're looking forward to deploying that.
I just wouldn't want to tell people that was specific to something that they were looking at. But if you do have a question about that, please keep an eye on the website. Please also contact us. We want to hear from you.
That's great. What is, you in our previous conversations, you had indicated that one of your jobs is to sort of highlight what's going on in the Northeast, and you've been doing a lot of traveling around that. Can you tell us some of the most innovative projects that you've seen, or that things that Secretary Granholm is interested in the northern New England area that we should all be knowing about?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm most interested in is this. Of course. We had the opportunity to travel to
Spencer, sorry to interrupt, but you faded out. So you said I am most interested in, and then I didn't hear what you said. So can you say it again?
I am most interested in, I'm just kidding. I'm most interested in the green economy pipeline. Did everyone hear that? So essentially that kind of community college workforce, kind of like hands-on job training to the next generation of clean economy worker. And so we had the opportunity to both go to the Port of Providence, where they're in the process of kind of developing a manufacturing hub for these, the foundations for some of these wind towers, and that they're going to be using for the South Fork project and some others right off the coast. Then we also had the chance to go to the Port of Albany, where they're preparing, where they'll actually be building the tower components, some of the tower components for what will be future New York, New Jersey bike, that project right off the coast. And what they're doing is they've partnered with the Hudson Valley Community College to actually train workers to kind of get ready for the welding jobs that are going to be coming, right? And so to give you some idea, we had Secretary Granholm go to the Port of Albany and then head to Hudson Valley Community College, where she was actually able to take like a virtual welding class. So her and Senator Gillibrand and a couple of representatives were actually in like a competition to try to learn how to weld. And I will just say, even seeing that, right, that little piece of it, how that works, most of these students already had jobs lined up, and so it has been really, really cool to see kind of that soup to nuts, right? The just in 1 year, get the degree and then move on to the workforce, and then go back to your community college to train the next generation, right? Like that's what we need to see more of, and I'm hoping that as part of implementation, we'll see a little bit more of that, not just in Maine, but all across the country, which is awesome.
Nice. I would encourage everybody, I love the networking that's going on in the chat, encourage people to put in questions for Spencer, because I certainly, you don't need to hear my questions, we want to hear your questions. This is a question from, okay, because I'm going to butcher this name, I'm so sorry, Gabenga Adekoya. Sorry about that if I've done that wrong. And then the question is, does the government's plans for building EV charging stations match the data of public adoption and acceptance of EVs? And so the question is sort of like, there's clearly a lot of funding for EVs, but how do you, I would broaden it out to say, how do you sort of make sure that there's also the demand to sort of access the infrastructure that's being planned?
Wasn't it like the kind of chicken and the egg conundrum, right? Because it's kind of like, which came first? I think a couple of thoughts. There's clearly an interest, there's clearly an interest, but there's also seems to be like a market shift to EV charging, EV cars. So as you're seeing, GM, as you're seeing Ford, as you're seeing these companies kind of really making investments and commitments to being all electric by you name the date, right? Like that's going to change how consumers behave. I would argue, I mean, just personally, the Ford F-150 Lightning is a really interesting change because I remember when I came into office in 2015, the question was whether one, we could have a truck that could be electric, but two, have a truck that could be electric that could also plow, pick up your garbage, take your kids to school, right? Those heavy duty vehicles, like the real challenge. And we seem to be making our way there, not in the 10 or 15 years that we thought, but here we stand in 2022 and you have, school districts ordering buses. The city of Portland has electric buses and electric recycling trucks, right? So like this is coming, but it's also coming a little bit faster than anyone anticipated. And so it's helping communities have that initial discussion in their budgeting process, right? Where all of the decisions are made about what the next generation, are we gonna invest? I know people don't like to get parking tickets, but are we gonna invest in an all electric fleet for our parking enforcement agency, right? Like those types of opportunities. I think the back to the specific question at hand, this joint office between Department of Transportation and Department of Energy on EV charging station implementation, I think is considering all of those. And they're also considering one other factor, which is a really important one, which is our infrastructure, right? Our how you're going to power these EV charging stations, and whether the grid, as it's currently in the form that it's currently, can actually support these charging stations, not just like at the DOT or on the side of the highway, but at every person's home, right? And so you're seeing a lot of pilot projects going on across the country where they're doing kind of these, these neighborhoods that all have EV charging stations. What that means, what kind of demand that means, especially at peak demand hours, right? That stuff is all going on at this moment. So I would say, like, as we're moving through implementation, you're going to see that. But it's a good question as to, like, what do they call that line on the chart? What is the delta each year as you go through implementation? I was not a math person, okay? I just want to be clear with everyone. I was an engineering major when I was a freshman, but luckily my calc teacher really had a heart to heart with me and said, Spencer, is this something you want to do? And clearly I was not a math person, so.
Well, I'm with you there. I was going to say uptake rate, but I'm sure that's not right. So John Ferlin must have been reading my mind, because when you were talking about EVs and EV adoption, I mean, one of the big questions is, how do we get people in Maine, some of whom have limited resources, to be able to partake in these kinds of opportunities, or the clean energy transition? And then John sort of his question is about how can the DOE's focus on diversity and inclusion result in benefits to Maine. So what do you see in terms of the connection between Maine's, the kinds of diversity that Maine has, some of its ethnic diversity, some of it's economic diversity. How can we sort of leverage those kinds of traits to sort of get additional funding from DOE? What, given that you are kind of in that discussion, what are your thoughts on that?
So this is actually an issue that's like near and dear to my heart, because before I left, I had to leave. Before I left Maine, I had to leave my co-chairmanship with Ambassador Dana of the Penobscot Indian Nation on the equity subcommittee of the Maine Climate Council, and we were actually looking at the 15 recommendations that the larger group was considering, and trying to figure out how you could have equity be a part of or a piece of each one of those pillars. And what we saw there was one, understanding like the communities and end users of specific things. So in that case, we were talking about heat pumps just before I left, and it's, you know, I didn't have a heat pump until I was 31 years old, right? Classic, you know, early 1900s home with oil burners and radiators, right? Forced hot water, forced steam. Like that's like what I grew up in. And I had my first winter with the heat pump, and I could not even believe the difference that it made. And I also could not believe the difference in cost, right? Instead of spending $200 a month on oil, I was spending $40 a month on electricity, right? Huge, huge difference. But with respect to what we're doing at the federal level, equity is at the table at almost every issue that we work on. So the president has put forward his EJ goals, which is 40% of the benefits of any sort of investments go to what we think of as the federal government and define the federal government as disadvantaged communities. At the Department of Energy, we actually have an office that is dedicated to this, and a senior advisor to the secretary specifically that's dedicated to this very issue. Her name is Shalonda Baker. She is absolutely amazing. If you get a chance, I would highly suggest that you take a look on DOE's website about what they're doing on diversity and inclusion. But that voice is at every single conversation. So as we're going through implementation, we're hosting webinars with disadvantaged communities, but also making sure that they understand kind of the application process to participate in these funding opportunities, specific webinars, not just with our tribal partners as well, but also with our rural neighbors, our BIPOC population, right? Trying to make sure that the end user is in full awareness of what the programs that we're doing. And Shalonda Baker is leading the way at the Department of Energy, and that's why that position has been so elevated by Secretary Dana.
Nice. All right, so certainly would encourage.
I should say that office. I'm so sorry, sir. I should say that office, because it's more than Shalonda. I mean, they are building out their office, and they are working on engagements as well. But if you see anything with Shalonda's name on it, whether you get the opportunity to hear her speak or describe the work that they're doing, it is it's truly incredible.
Thank you. And to those of you who are on, certainly we have a few more opportunities for questions. One quick question before we go back to the chat is, can you pull back the curtain a little bit? Obviously we don't often have access to our hometown connections down in DC. What's been the most surprising or unexpected thing about being down in DC since you've arrived? In terms of your work with DOE, or you're obviously in the administration, what can you share that obviously is probably some things you can't share, but what can you share?
I think possibly the culture that has been established especially at the department is actually, I had no real sense, because as a municipal official, I didn't have as much connection with the federal government. We all, we're all Mainers. We all go to the airport, or we all go to events where, we see familiar names, King, Collins, Tingry, Golden, right? And you can actually go up and like say hello, or like, hey, I have this issue, and it's not like a weird thing. Like I don't think people realize, like in other states that doesn't quite happen as much. Like Cory Booker is around, but like it's not the same like as it is in Maine. Like you can actually run into your representatives at the federal level. And I think, so I had no real idea of what this might look like. And I think when I came down, you know, my department is extremely diverse just as it is. People come from all walks of life. But I think people underestimate how many people, I'm 33, about to be 34, how many people who are far younger than I am even, who are on the front lines of this climate fight in this department, and who are here not because, you know, they're working on the sexiest issue or, you know, they're getting paid the big bucks. They're here because they want to stand at this precipice where we are, which is historic investment in a department that has the ability to, quite frankly, change the lives of every single person. And it's for the reasons that each question that's been asked to me, you know, the electric buses, the charging stations, the heat pumps, the electrification of neighborhoods, like those things get me extremely excited, if you can't tell. And to be working there at this moment, under this president, under this secretary who's equally energized, is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I truly, like, I didn't know that I would feel that strongly about it until I got to be down here working with these people. So hopefully that kind of answers it, but I feel like completely energized. I was at the end of my city council career, I was tired. We just went through 2 years of a pandemic. Everyone was cranky. We've been cooped up in our homes for the last, I couldn't see anybody. Like my favorite thing was to go out and like walk the neighborhood and just say hello, and you could do that, but nobody wanted you to get too close, So I missed that, and this has provided that like real shot of energy and adrenaline, and it's just the best opportunity.
Nice. One last question, then we'll wrap it up. So Ryan Walker from The Wave asks about, are there funds that would be dedicated towards interconnecting renewable energy projects that otherwise would not be economically viable? We know interconnection in Maine has been quite an issue, and also in Massachusetts too. So what kind of assistance do you see this funding given to smaller, renewable energy projects that are going to be part of the clean energy transition?
Well, that's a great question. As far as Build Back Better goes, I obviously can't say because it doesn't look, it's not Build Back Better anymore, right? It's not the same. They're kind of working on things, and I don't really have a good sense of that at the moment because any conversations that are going on, if any at the moment, are beyond me. As far as like interconnection goes and transmission goes, DOE did release an NOI. I want to say it might have been just before Christmas or just before the new year. And I'm blanking on whether what impact that had to those smaller projects. So Ryan, if you want to shoot me a quick email, I could probably find that information out with our Office of Electricity and see if we can kind of check in on that. But it escapes me, and I don't want to give the wrong answer. So,
all right, well, we'll have Ryan follow up with you. All right, so first of all, big thank you to Spencer. Appreciate you making yourself available to bring us up to date on what you've been doing and answering everybody's questions. And also a big thank you to everybody who took time out of their busy day to come and participate in this E2Tech Connects with us. And as we indicated previously, there's some upcoming events. Clean Tech Open is coming. We have a great forum on, I think it's an E2Tech on the Maine Space Grant Consortium, the Space Complex, investing in talent and innovation. And then also we have an upcoming seminar on sludge spreading, which is actually sort of what to do, where do we put the poo is essentially what we've been calling it at this point, because what are you going to do with it now that you can't put it on farmlands, and there's a big issue in Maine about that. And then, as I said earlier, we are doing the 20th anniversary of E2Tech. It's going to be a party. It's going to be fun. It's going to be local. There's going to be a good speaker. So, well, more information to come about that, but that will be in May. So keep your eyes out. And Riley, anything else we need to share before we go?
I can't think of anything. We got the smiling screenshot and we're all set.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Spencer.
And
This was
I'm
great.
glad I don't have to come talk about poo, because that would be, that doesn't really fall within
That's good.
what I do.
And I'm not gonna be talking about it either, but I'm glad there's some people who can talk about it with a straight face. So, but thanks everybody. Have a great, what are we on, Thursday? Have a great rest of your Thursday. And we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.